Okay, let me break it down for you.
Judgment, prejudice, bias, it all still exists.
If I want to take this huge, overwhelming problem, I have to start with myself.
Finally clicked for me.
Compassion is a necessity.
Well, that was really uncomfortable. Believe it or not, that was just 1 minute. So I'd like you all to imagine 2 weeks of silence. Would kind of drive you to insanity, maybe make you imagine doing really intense things, I'm not sure. Anyways, I did 2 weeks of silence. Not in a retreat, but in a boarding house of all places. Going to school with friends and interacting with others all day long. And truthfully, this experience is extremely hard for me to talk about because I don't really understand all of it yet myself. But what I do know is that silence is unbelievably powerful. However, it is unfathomable and indescribable. It is the most mentally testing thing that I can imagine, and I went into it completely unprepared. Silence is so confusing and so overwhelming and so chaotic, yet so peaceful at the same time. The 2 weeks I spent in silence were by far the most difficult but important and developmental weeks of my life. It pushed my mental and emotional boundaries far beyond what I was comfortable with and put me in the most vulnerable place I have ever been. Throughout this time, I was forced to face my emotions, cope with these difficulties, and find my comfort outside that comfort zone. I went into silence not only unprepared, but in a state of complete chaos. 2 days before I went into silence, I threw my 18th birthday party. Some really bad decisions were made. It got somewhat out of hand. I lost control, scaring a lot of my friends and emotionally hurting some people that were close to me. At the end of my breakdown, I ended up punching a solid wooden door and breaking my right hand. This was really insignificant to me, however, compared to the emotional pain that I had caused at the time. And I went into the silence without being able to apologize or communicate with the people I hurt. And my hand was a physical reminder of that throughout the time I was in silence. During my time in silence, my self-made guidelines were no speaking, no written communication or online communication. So the only way that I could communicate anything, emotions or simple needs, was through gestures. I read the Desiderata every day in the morning. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of that. It's a really amazing poem on how to live one's life, written by Max Ehrmann, a lawyer and poet in around 1872. I also journaled every day. This was a huge part of my silence because it was the outlet where I could process every day that went by. Because I couldn't talk about it, it was the only way I could really go over everything that I was going through. The first 4 days of my silence were dealing with the chaos from my birthday party and everything, and breaking the impulse to speak, because people would talk to me and I would want to reply. And so the first 4 days was really just focused breaking impulse. The next 8 days, I would call the heart of my silence. They were extremely interpersonal, confusing, and amazing. I found some sort of place of mental solitude. That's the best way I can describe it. And in that place, I had to get real with myself. I had to get so real that I had to bow down to humility and forgiveness. And during this time, an amazing transformation occurred that I didn't fully understand or even comprehend at the time, and am now starting to understand more and more. And then, on the 12th day, I was done. But my silence wasn't finished. I had 2 more days. So I followed through with the last 2 days, kind of goofing off and being a lot more goofy, I guess, and contemplating what the first thing I was going to say would be. And so then, when I woke up on the 15th day, I sat up in bed, and I live in a boarding house, so I sat up and just yelled to everyone, "Good morning," and my silence was over. This transformation that occurred during the heart of my silence, I actually realized or understood in the week after I had finished my silence. And what I realized is that I had begun to forgive myself. Forgiveness is the greatest form of humility and the greatest gift possible, for it forces one to take complete responsibility for one's actions and allows you to move forward in your life. True forgiveness only comes from a place of unconditional love. I have personally done a multitude of things that I have not been emotionally capable of forgiving myself for. I've hurt a lot of people and didn't know how to deal with that. Many of them are far too personal for me to talk about today, but one that has been on my mind for the past 3.5 years is when I was in 9th grade. I don't know what drove me to do this, but I stole some extremely valuable items, but even more sentimental things, from the family of one of my closest friends. When I got caught, I was forced to return what I had taken and admit to what I had done. And I felt terrible, like really bad, and I expected and hoped, actually, that they would get angry at me and hold it against me and just hate me. But instead, they completely and truly forgave me. I used to wish that they had gotten angry and held it against me forever and yelled at me and whatnot, because their forgiveness was 100 times more painful than any anger or hatred they could inflict upon me. Their forgiveness made it impossible for me to forget what I had done or to justify it. I tried my best to make things right. I did a lot of things, and everything I did made it easier for them to forgive me, and I slowly was able to rebuild trust. But nothing I did allowed me to forgive myself. I have thought about this every day for the past 3.5 years, and it's been weighing on me more and more. During the 2 weeks I spent in silence, this dominated my thoughts and my dreams. I couldn't get around it or get over it. It was just there. So then, near the end of my silence, something about that place of deep solitude, during the heart of that silence, I was forced to face myself. It made me face the shame of what I had done. I fought to reject it and myself, mainly through distraction, movies, television. Even though I hardly used computers or anything, it was my only outlet of distraction. But then something happened where I started actually seeking solitude, physical solitude and mental solitude. And from that place, I faced myself in some terms, and I accepted what I had done. And from that place of acceptance, I was able to begin the process of self-forgiveness. The moment when this happened was incredible, and I am incapable of describing it to you. This was the most emotionally painful thing I've ever done to myself, and the greatest gift I've ever given myself. Even though, of course, I didn't understand that at the time. Kind of just thought I was going crazy, but my process of self-forgiveness has just begun. I will never forget anything that I've done, But now I can start to build a new legacy and move forward in my life. I would like all of you to think of a time when someone really hurt you, like truly hurt you, and you were able to forgive them. Now, I would like you to think of a time when you truly hurt someone, really hurt them, and they forgave you. Have you forgiven yourself for that? What I believe to be a truth is unless we let go, unless we forgive, unless we move forward and realize the situation is over, we cannot move forward with our lives. We will be stuck in that route. And I know each of us have something to accept and something to let go of. However, this is much easier said than done, of course. And as Shakespeare put it, to err is human, to forgive divine. But I believe that we are all divine creatures, more than capable of forgiveness. And we must forgive, for we owe it to ourselves. For it is essential for us to move forward in our lives. Forgiveness comes from within, and finding it is a personal journey that can manifest in many, many different ways. And I promise you, none of them will be easy. But what we can do is go out looking for forgiveness, consciously looking for forgiveness, and it will definitely come to you. And through that, we need our forgiveness. Our world needs forgiveness. As a very wise classmate of mine once said, valet, right there. As she said, we must accept that we are not forgetting in order to move forward without looking backwards. So, please take your life in your own hands and consciously go out looking for forgiveness. It is the greatest gift that you can give yourself. My experience with silence was so powerful and so impactful. I am truly grateful for every minute of it, even though it was extremely hard and rough. But it has changed my life in a positive way and has been more eye-opening than anything I could have ever imagined. I am truly proud to have taken this upon myself and accomplished this on my own. And I invite anyone who is inspired by what I've done or thinks silence could benefit them in any way, anything, or is even just curious, to try just one day of silence and see where that takes you. The poem that I mentioned earlier, the Desiderata, is a truly amazing poem, and I believe we can all benefit from it. It guided me more than anything during my time in silence, and will continue to do so throughout the rest of my life. As the first line of the Desiderata so clearly puts it, "Go placidly amidst the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence." Thank you.